All right. Hello, Alex. Welcome to Outlier. Thanks so much for the talk.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, going good. Well, so I don't know if you've been keeping track of the chat, but first of all, um, several people basically want a workshop of this. And so I guess the question is, uh, do you ever do workshops of this? Or is this something you think you might do in the future?
Yeah, I haven't in the past. I didn't know that so many people would be excited by command line tools, but it's definitely something I could work on. And I'm always finding new CLI tools or building new stuff. So, I guess follow me on Twitter, see what happens.
Fantastic. Um, Another question that came in was, is there a way to program and export complex nested JSON files from starting with a CSV or only the other way around?
Yeah, I think so. I think in general, command line tools are very good for top level data transformations. So like if you have a CSV and you want to rename a column to something else, or if you want to like take a bunch of numeric columns, add them together and create like another column and like export that to JSON. That's fairly straightforward to do in command line interface. If you need to go do something a little bit more complicated, if it's like a lot of nested fields or creating objects on the fly, then you could always go down, a level into like a programming language like Python or Node or R or whatever, and just create a script like that. And when you have that script in whatever programming language, then you can call that in command line as well. So like the command line is very good for like very top level transformation stuff. And anytime you need to go deeper into it, just dive into the programming language a little bit, write some code to whatever complex thing you're trying to do, and you could just bring that back into the command line with the standard with your programming language, interpreters and all.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and as we wait for more questions to come in, if you have questions, throw them in the chat. I'm just curious, like, what inspired you to want to do a talk on command line tools? Is this something you use often? Yeah, what inspired it?
Yeah, I always, I use command line tools all the time. I wouldn't say all the ones that I have in the talk that I use that like every single day. Some of them are just like when random problems come up and I'll reach for that maybe like once every week or every few months or whatever. So it's not like I use these tools all the time. And essentially like the tools that I do use every day, it's like the same 4 or 5 of them, like, Git, change directory, list files in a directory, stuff like that. So like, it's not like I use these exuberant fancy command line tools all the time. But just like it's just been an interest of mine. Every time I see something cool, I like add it to my toolbox or I keep notes of it. Or whenever I show someone, they're like, "Whoa, that's so cool!" And after a lot of time, I just have a long list of cool tools and random things, and most of them having to do with data transformations or data visualizations. And I thought there was other people would benefit from that as well. So I thought it would be an interesting topic.
Yeah, and are there times that you would most like suggest that people use the command line more that maybe they don't think to right now?
Yeah, I think
Like
when it comes
specific?
to yeah, I
Sorry.
think like that's okay. I think whenever you are using whenever you want to automate something that has like a graphical user interface to it, right? So like if you find yourself in some program like Excel or some other weird desktop application where you find yourself like clicking on the same menus, clicking the same items, filling in the same parameters in a form that comes up, and you're just like doing a lot of these things manually over and over again, and you want to automate something, then something like either getting into a programming language or looking at the command line to automate that stuff, that's typically the best way for at least for me. Like, I go on Excel and I press the same menus over and over again. And if I could just automate that with some command line tool or something, that's the stuff that I think works pretty well when you like want to get into the command line for the first time. Saving time is always something that everyone always wants, and like that's fairly easy to do in command line. And yeah, I mean, there could be other times as well. Like maybe you have if you are a programmer and you're writing a lot of code and you find yourself running the same code over and over again, or you want an easier way to like reuse it or point it to like different file types or have different export types to whatever, transformation process that you have, then building a command line tool for that might be, something that could be beneficial as well. So it all kind of depends, but I think usually if you're automating something that you usually point and click for, or you have code that you want to reuse in different formats and all, then like looking at the command line or building a command line tool can typically help there.
Nice. We had one question asking, could this be adapted to GitHub Actions?
Yeah, I think so. So there's a few different ways you can think about that. So if you have a command line tool and you want to use it in a GitHub action, that's totally possible. So GitHub Actions, it could be a Docker container. There's many different ways to like get your code or get programs you want into a GitHub action workflow. So that way you could kick it off on a cron job or do it on every commit or whatever you have there. So that's definitely possible. If you're thinking the other way around, like you have a command line or you're in the command line and you want to run a GitHub action to see how that works locally, there's a tool called Act. It's ACT. It's a way to run GitHub actions locally on your computer. It's mainly used for like testing things out to see if like, instead of having to push your code 20 times to get a workflow working, you can instead run it locally, and that's like a community effort. It's not like an official GitHub thing, but like if you're thinking of like, oh, from the command line, kick off a GitHub action, that might be possible. But in general, like if you have a command line tool and you want to put in a GitHub action workflow, Docker containers, there's a lot of information about this in the GitHub documentation. If you ever get stuck on that, let me know, because I've definitely been in a position where I spend like an hour just reading the GitHub documentation, very confused until I finally figure it out. So yeah, just hit me up if you ever need help with that workflow specifically.
If people need help with that and they want to hit you up, is Twitter a good way to do it?
Yeah, Twitter, or I'm in the Data Visualization Society Slack as well.
Nice.
The topic tools, I think, is a good channel for this kind of talk as well, to make it public and other people can benefit and all. So yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And someone asked, what's your favorite shell?
I like, so for those of you who are unfamiliar, shell is like I don't know the exact technical term for it, but you could have different programs running your terminal, and they're all mostly the same. There's small syntax differences here and there, but for the most part, Bash, B-A-S-H, that's the one that I started with and I just kind of kept. There's been a lot of newer ones recently, one called Fish, one called, I don't know how to say it in real life. I've never actually said the word out loud, but it's spelled Z-S-H. That's another newer one that I believe is now the default for MacBooks, if you're into that. But I just learned
you're
with
into
Bash.
That.
And, yeah, I learned with Bash, and like all of my dot files and all of my configuration is built with Bash, and I don't really want to convert it to something new. I'm sure I'm missing out on cool stuff like auto-completion and all that, but like I just stick with Bash. I'm a little boring, but yeah.
Sure. I mean, whatever works. And once you're familiar with something, it's just like the cost of switching. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, and the command line is such a personal thing as well. Like, whatever command line program you have, you could use whatever shell, right? Like Bash or Fish or whatever, like it'll work all the same. But it's a very personal choice. Like it's the terminal that you download, and it's the shells that you choose, and the programs that you like to have, the aliases and the the colors and configuration. That's also another very fun topic. But yeah, it's a very personal decision, but personally, Bash.
Totally. Someone was curious, have you memorized all of these? By these, I suppose they mean maybe some of these tools or the notes that you shared in this talk, or do you store them somewhere for reference?
Yeah, I have definitely not memorized all these. I think so. Two things that you could do that would definitely help out. Tab completion. So when you're on the terminal and you hit tab, a lot of things will autocomplete for you, or it'll prompt you like what things you have. So if you're like, oh, this program starts with an A, so you just hit A, hit tab, and then you'll see all the tools that start with A. So that helps out a lot. I do have my own personal notes of like, small things here and there, but I barely reference that. Most of the time, like if I wander, like I'm like, oh, I remember this cool command line tool, but I haven't used it in 6 months. I just like Google it, find the documentation, use it again. I mean, there are a few tools that I do memorize like the names of, but then it might be like, oh, what's the exact sub command that I have to use? Or how do I input a file? Or how do I like output as JSON? And a lot of the tools are very similar. So like most of the time you can just get by like adding a flag for like format JSON, and then it just kind of works. But sometimes another tool has like slightly different syntax. So it all depends. It all like, but for the most part, I think tab completion helps out a lot with tools you already have installed, or just having your own personal notes. Or for me, like most of the tools that I like star on GitHub tend to be a command line tool. And you can search for your stars on GitHub, and now they have like these features of like your specific lists. So you can have like a list of whatever you have, and like that's also searchable. So I think those three in combination usually help me with like remembering these tools, or at least the names of them. But yeah, I definitely don't memorize everything and know it off the top of my head. But yeah,
sure. And that's also it's what like Google Docs and like Google and is for. I have a terrible memory. So what are your personal favorite customizations for your CLI?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit boring. So one customization that you could have is like your prompt. So whenever you open the terminal and every new command that you run, you have a prompt to the right of it. So you could, it's by default, usually like the name of your machine and your username. So like mine's like Alex at, IP address or whatever. There's a lot of tools out there that help you generate a new prompt to make it a little bit more fun and exciting. I added colors to mine. I used to have emojis on mine too, but then that kind of got annoying. So you can customize that as much as you want. And I definitely encourage you to do so, like add your favorite colors, do whatever. Depending on your terminal emulator, you could change colors as well. So like the background or the foreground text or whatever else. There's a lot of tools that are have generate color palettes. So like I have like a Batman themed when I want to be like Batman, or at least for me, like I have, I work with a lot of different clients. So like I have different colors for the different clients I work for. So like, oh, I'm working for client A. So I have a script that changes my terminal to blue. So that way I keep things in my mind for blue. Kind of like when you're in school, you have like different colored notebooks with different
subjects. So you're associating with the different project. That's super smart.
Yeah, it's very helpful as well. And yeah, I mean, just in general, colors and prompts, that usually gets me all the way there. Other people have like, they may want specific fonts or specific, sizing or a bunch of other things. Also for me, I use the Kitty terminal. So that one has a lot of customizations for new tabs. So like I'll have one terminal window and I have like several tabs. And I might have tabs like next to each other, kind of like a browser or something. And that helps me a lot personally. That's more like the other meta level of whatever. But that'll depend on whatever terminal client you're using. So yeah.
Sure. Are there any special source you highly recommend for JSON in command?
So I think if you're working with JSON, two of the tools I talked about, JQ and FX, those are pretty good tools for exploring JSON data, or at least printing it out to your terminal. And you could also like pipe in, that could be useful for like kind of like doing small transformations for JSON data. So if it's an object that's very nested, you just want to pull out a few fields, JQ and FX are very good for that. A lot of tools now, they have ways to like export as JSON. So like if you're running a command and you want to see the results of it, there might be a command option to like format the output as JSONs. That way you can pipe that somewhere else, or that way you can, manipulate that in an easier way. There's also a cool job called JC that's on the list of the 100 plus, command line tools. JC is a way to, if there are other popular commands, ones that have been written in the 80s and 90s before JSON existed, those typically don't have JSON output. So JC is a tool that will take those, that will take the output of those old commands, and it will generate JSON for it. So like if you are, parsing IP addresses and you're using a lot of like complex text manipulation or parsing like raw input or whatever, JC is a good tool to like kind of take that and make it a little bit more structured if you're happy to do that with your JSON data. But in general, like at least for me, JQ and FX gets me most of the way there. And if I ever need to do anything more complex, then I dive into like a programming language like Python or Node.js or SQLite and SQL and parts like that.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And people also were wondering if you have these slides to share anywhere. Are these available for people?
Yeah. I will clean it up a bit and I'll share it in the Google document that's in the notes. Yeah.
Nice. There was also curiosity around what inspired you to switch to doing freelance. How long have you been freelancing now, and what inspired that change?
Yeah, I've been freelancing for 1 year. Before that, I was working at a very large tech company who crashed recently. And I think during that time, I just kind of realized that the corporate world that I was working in and the projects that I was working on wasn't as fulfilling. And I wanted to do something a little bit closer to my interests. And at that time, that was like data visualizations, working with data journalism, all that stuff. And at the time, I thought, trying out freelancing would be, I was at a part of my life where I thought that would, where I had the time, the resources, and the privilege to do so. So I decided to try it out. It went very well. It took me a while to find clients and the right way to do it. I've been doing it for a little over a year. I do have an old blog series of where I talked about starting freelancing as a software engineer. And I kind of stopped that after a while because that takes up a lot of time or whatever. But I was planning on posting a 1 year recap of what freelancing is like in this space. But I mean, it's not for everyone, that's for sure. At the point that I was in when I started, that's kind of what I wanted for my career. And I just wanted to work on different things and different tools and software and all that. And so far it's going pretty well. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah. How long did it take, do you think, before you felt like, sometimes when folks start out with freelancing, it can, you have to find clients and things. Like, how long did it take you to feel kind of settled in it?
Yeah, I was lucky because right when I started, I already had 2 clients, so people that I was talking to while I was doing my job. So that
That
was
helps.
very, very helpful. Yeah, 100%. I think if I just kind of went in with nothing, that would have been a lot scarier and a lot more like intensive.
Totally.
But I think with that, with a combination of like, I would create like observable notebooks and tweet about them, and a lot of them were about using technology or using like a lot of them were about command line tools, or a lot of them were about like data visualization in general. And that kind of like creating content helped with like finding new clients. So I just get like contacted by people, and not all the clients work out, not all the projects are very long, but eventually I kind of found the right clients and kind of found the right groove. And I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm still trying to figure out like more projects that I want to take on or bigger things that I want to do. It's definitely a learning process, this entire thing, and I definitely don't have it figured out yet. I have it figured out for like the next month or two, but then after that, we'll see and all. But yeah, I mean, I think starting off, having clients helped me out a ton. And also being coding and programming as a freelancer, especially in the space of like data visualizations and D3, it's just a very common, it seems more common to do so in this space than it is with other spaces. So it just kind of worked out.
Cool. Yeah, well, we have just a few more minutes. If people have any last questions, post them and I will ask. But otherwise, I guess a question is, well, are there any questions that you get often, like that you think I could have asked, or anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't talk a lot with other people about command line tools in general.
Yeah.
Like, especially now as a freelancer, it's a lot more lonely in terms of like, the technology they work with and the people. I don't share my terminal screen as often as I do now as when I had a larger team.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's the number of tools might be overwhelming, and that's okay. You don't have to know all these tools. I mean, pick one or two that you think will be nice in your day-to-day work. So like if you work with SVGs a lot, then look at SVGO for optimizing SVGs. Or if you like downloading videos, then look at YouTube DL and work with that and see how long you go. And like any way that you could like slowly incorporate it into your day-to-day work or even your personal life. For example, there's a tool called Spotify TUI. It's a way to like a Spotify player inside your terminal. It's overkill most of the time, but like it's a fun little, like it gets me in the terminal more often. And if you're starting out, maybe that's maybe that's your introduction into how the terminal works and how programs work and all. So whatever, it's yeah, it might be overwhelming. Just do it slowly, find a couple things you like, and yeah, it'll work out.
Nice, yeah. And someone wants to know how fast you can type.
I have gotten a lot faster at typing ever since picking up the command line. I don't know how fast. I mean, I would say like in the video today, like I did speed up some parts because I was making mistakes. I was deleting things that was wrong, so I just kind of like sped it up and
sure,
whatever. But I've never tried it out myself. I saw one of those cool new keyboards that are like, it's like two balls you hold and it's like a stick, and then like you can like just go like that and it will like type out like 200 words per minute or something. I'd love to do that, but I think in general like typing command line commands where they're just like a few letters, I'm very good at. But like when I have to type out in English or I have to think about like what I'm actually writing, I'm not that fast. But yeah.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Alex. It was lovely to have you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a lot of fun, for sure.
Have a good one.
What did I say?